Good morning to all of you, honourable ministers, excellencies, colleagues and friends. Good morning and a very, very warm welcome here in Paris. We are delighted that you could join us today for a discussion that promises to be very timely and interesting. Post-COP26 priorities supporting Africa's clean energy transitions. A continent and a topic which both lay close to my heart. And while we had initially planned to do this in February, I'm very pleased that by delaying it, that most of us could come to Paris and to meet in person. And thank you for being here today. Ladies and gentlemen, the sense of urgency for climate change is recalled at every COP meeting, and we have one COP meeting a year. And the role energy has to play is obvious, but changing is difficult. Every change manager can write books about how difficult it is, but also about the opportunities of change. In autumn, Europe was confronted with price increases, and we believed that it was temporary, and we also believed that we could fix it. Every country took measures, and then we were confronted with an even harder reality, that we know we cannot fix this alone with price measures. And this war that's going on our continent here in Europe makes clear that the energy transition is more as drastically limiting our greenhouse gas emissions. It is about widening the spectrum of the energy vectors. The IEA, the UNFCCC, calls for actions to reduce the consumption of fossil fuels, and Europe's energy dependence on fossil fuels is the example of how it should not be done. We need to step up our efforts on energy efficiency and renewable energy sources. It strengthens me in my conviction that there is only one direction to go, and that we have to work together to realize clean energy ambitions. Our fight against climate change will only be won if the whole world is on board, and it therefore requires an inclusive approach. Africa is currently home to around 1/6 of the world's population. It only represents 5.8% of the global energy consumption. Given its strong population growth, rapid urbanization rates, and its heavy dependence on biofuels for cooking and heating, with its related disadvantages on emissions and health, the future of Africa's energy system is of global interest. But, and it's an important but, I believe that Africa is holding the keys for a climate-friendly energy policy worldwide. It's an opportunity for the entire continent. The turn to renewable energy puts Africa in the center. The continent has a vast potential of wind and solar technologies, allowing for the development of onshore and offshore wind farms, large-scale and rooftop solar, as well as other green technologies, for example, hydrogen. Africa should also take advantage of the wealth of rare earth materials needed for the renewable technologies. Renewable energy projects have been developed across Africa, and in some regions of Africa, they are global leaders. But there is still an urgent need to scale up fast. Africa has an important role to play in supporting other countries' transition objectives. Many European Union member states, including Belgium, have made the import of green hydrogen molecules from countries with large renewables potentials one of the pillars of their hydrogen strategies. Shipping the sunshine, if you will. And you will hear about a concrete project in this context from Alexander Saverys, CEO of the Compagnie Maritime Belge, during the panel discussion. But let me be very clear. This is not about just importing and exporting. It's about value chains, it's about our societies, it's about welfare. It's about a mutual beneficial policy. And I'm convinced that international projects as these can perfectly complement national and local initiatives and create win-wins for all parties. As such, they will not only support the African nations in realizing their energy transition and contribute to the economic development of the countries, it will create a wide range of jobs and possibilities at home for their citizens. It is a people-centered approach. Ladies and gentlemen, the International Energy Agency, under the skillful leadership of Dr. Birol, is at the forefront of these reflections. in particular thanks to its net zero emissions report that describes a wide range of options compatible with clean energy transition paths. In addition to its central objective to promote energy security, the agency presents and provides analytical scenario projections about our energy and climate future. It monitors progress in the implementation of policies. It maps progress in energy technologies maturity. And all of this work is of extreme interest to both its member and non-member states. And the Clean Energy Transitions Programme, among others, leverages this unique energy expertise at the IEA across all fuels and all technologies to accelerate global clean energy transitions, particularly in association countries, but also more broadly in major emerging markets and developing economies. And the Belgian government stands ready to join forces with the IEA in order to further enhance the IEA's capacity to put the IEA's expertise and that of one of its member states at the disposal of the African public and private actors in accelerating clean energy transitions, supporting also the faster implementation of ambitious national and regional clean energy policies in Africa. Continued IEA capacity building efforts with the aim of improving statistics and modeling capabilities enable improved understanding of the energy challenges in these countries, inform effective policymaking and support clean energy transitions. I therefore look very much forward to the panel debate, to hear about the policy objectives, about actions and priorities of several African countries and companies, so the IEA can further fine-tune the focus of its outreach activities and align them with the expectations in the field. Because only if we can join forces, and only if we learn from each other's best, but also sometimes worst practices, we can achieve our joint ambition to halt climate change. As this event is organized around the 2022 IEA ministerial meeting, it is my great honor to introduce our first two speakers. The IEA Ministerial Chair and United States Secretary of Energy, Her Excellency Ms. Jennifer Granholm, and the IEA Executive Director, Dr. Fatih Birol. But Secretary Granholm, I invite you up to the podium to deliver your introducing remarks. Thank you so much.
Great. Hello again, everybody. Thank you so much. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the last, yet so critically important side event of this ministerial. We all know that climate change obviously demands a truly global energy transition, and it's our duty to assist in that transition wherever and whenever and however we can. Our success in this will depend on our ability to recognize that the transition is going to look different in different parts of the world. So I'd like to thank Minister Van der Straeten. Thank you so much for your leadership, Vice Chair of the Ministerial, and for convening this meeting on the clean energy transition in Africa. Conversations about energy in Africa often focus on the need to bring reliable access to electricity to over 500 million sub-Saharan Africans who now live without it. And African governments and their partners have made historic progress in that regard over the past 2 decades. But over the next century, the continent's population is projected to rise tremendously, and of course, energy demand will rise along with it. But that growth doesn't have to pose an insurmountable challenge to our climate and our carbon emission goals, because with deliberate investment and dedicated support, African governments can build the clean energy infrastructure that is going to be necessary for them to deliver affordable and reliable energy to their growing populations, while, importantly, leapfrogging fossil fuels altogether. What an opportunity. So many have already gotten started. I think the African Development Bank's Desert to Power initiative, for example, aims to give 250 million people across 11 countries access to solar power. The U.S. Department of Energy is proud to support that initiative with technical and advisory assistance through our National Renewable Energy Lab. The IEA family can help scale and spread even more of these clean energy efforts through initiatives like the Clean Energy Transitions Program. The IEA can accelerate new and clean technology that's going to create economic opportunities in African nations and raise their energy security and sustain both their people and our planet. Of course, different regions in Africa have different needs. So more than just talking about an African clean energy transition, we need to discuss Morocco's transition. We need to talk about the Democratic Republic of the Congo's transition, South Africa's transition, and so forth. Different countries, different needs, different solutions. No one understands this, of course, better than the people in these regions and the countries themselves. I'm so pleased that there are so many representatives from the continent that are here today. And we're here to listen. We're here to learn from you. And for the rest of this group, as we listen, let us offer also ideas that could be replicated or adapted to accelerate the transition in Africa and accelerate the leapfrogging of fossil fuels. I believe that there is just great opportunity at hand if we're ready and we're willing to work together, which I know we are, if we're willing and ready to learn together, which I know we are, and to lean on each other. So let's make this just the first of many conversations. Let's keep our minds focused on how we can move from ideas to action, how we, as Gandhi would say, can put feet to our prayers. So thank you all so much. Dr. Birol, the stage is yours.
Very many thanks, Madam Secretary. Ministers, dear colleagues, a very good morning to all of you. And thank you very much to Minister Van der Straeten for organizing this great event here. Today, the energy leaders of the world came to Paris to this meeting, IEA meeting. We are very happy. We are going to discuss several issues: energy security, climate change, geopolitics. But the issue of Africa and the future of Africa in terms of energy and climate is extremely important to International Energy Agency. In fact, I can tell you that how IEA takes this issue so seriously goes back to almost 20 years. There are colleagues here who follow the IEA work since 20 years. 20 years ago, in discussions like this, many people were saying, so many people in Africa, they have no access to electricity. When you say so many people, if you don't quantify how many people, where, which country, it doesn't mean that you take this, it means that you don't take it so seriously. If you take something seriously, you quantify it. So 20 years ago, International Energy Agency has started each year how many people have access to electricity in country X, country Y in Africa. Then we look at the other hallmark of energy poverty in Africa, which is the access to clean cooking. Sometimes it's forgotten, but it's also a very important issue. So since 20 years, we take this issue very seriously in Africa. Why Africa is so important? There are many reasons I can give to you, but I will give you just one number. Think about this. In the next 20 years, 1 out of 2 persons added to global population will come from Africa. So 1 out of 2. Which means, if you look at the cities, we just look at the cities, the urbanization, in the next 20 years, 600 million additional people will move to cities in Africa, which means more than a Europe population today will be added to the population of Africa. This will have tremendous implications for energy, what kind of energy choices they will have. With the increasing income levels they will need, and modernization of life, they will need more energy, and the choices will be extremely important. Choices from energy sources to technologies, what kind of air conditioning they are going to use. And the one important, of course, good news is huge potential in terms of energy, enormous potential. At the time, where, as Madam Secretary mentioned, so many people have no access to electricity. One of the most heartbreaking data, we are a data-driven organization at the IEN, we always say data always wins. And one of the most heartbreaking data points I will give you now. Think about the sub-Saharan Africa in the map, how big it is, and how much solar potential is there, huge potential, and so much lack of electricity. Yet, the amount of electricity from solar generated in entire sub-Saharan Africa is only 1/3 of solar electricity generated in UK. So just look at the map, look at the solar radiation, and look at the numbers. And the investments you need to make this solar potential turn it to electricity to the people is really, really very, very small compared to what it could bring. Therefore, we see as International Energy Agency the potential, the electricity access potential in Africa, mainly in the renewable energy. Solar I mentioned, but also wind and hydropower, very, very important. But we also see, in some cases, a supporting role for, in some countries, for example, natural gas. Let me give you one example. Mozambique. Just was talking with the colleagues yesterday. In Mozambique, 40% of the population have access to electricity and 60% don't. And Mozambique has already discovered natural gas resources. And to tell the Mozambique people, you cannot use gas, you don't need to use gas, because it is this and that, would not be fair that they use the gas, bring it home, use it for electricity and for the industry. But the line share is, of course, for renewables here. When we talk about the climate change, we know very well that the 1 ton of CO2 going to atmosphere from Johannesburg or from Jakarta or from Detroit or from Paris or from Lille, it has the same effect on everybody. And the emissions, the climate change is an issue of concentration and accumulation of emissions since over 100 years. And when we look at the share, in other words, the sin of the Africa in the all emissions in this big continent with big population, it is less than 2%, almost nothing. But the impact of climate change is unfortunately disproportionately on the African people in terms of the droughts, in terms of other extreme weather events. So it is the reason I was only a few weeks ago, I was in Egypt, and Madam Commissioner is here, she was also there. Egypt, the country that is going to hold the COP27, my humble suggestion was to put the clean energy investments in Africa as a key topic. Because to mobilize investments in the Africa is very difficult. The cost of capital in sub-Saharan Africa is 7 times more expensive than in Europe or in North America or elsewhere. How we can reduce the risk through international financial institutions, multilateral development banks playing a catalyst role is critical. And it is the reason we are this year coming up with our specific Africa energy outlook with some suggestions from financement to investments to some grid solutions. And it is the reason why IEA, when we 2015, when we opened the doors of the IEA to emerging countries, we have been focusing on 2 countries as associate members. We were very happy to have South Africa and Morocco as our associate members, and both of the countries are here, both of the governments. And we are soon having, in fact, soon means tomorrow, have Egypt joining as an associate member, and I am very happy that we work perfectly with African Union Commission to look at the entire picture there. So, dear colleagues, Africa's energy future is very much at the heart of the IES preoccupations, IES program of work, and we will continue to support the entire continent hand in hand with our associate members and also with the African Union, and of course with all of our member countries. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, both Secretary Granholm and Dr. Birol, for your introduction on leapfrogging, about opportunities, but not without losing why we are doing this, about vulnerabilities, about climate change being a crisis multiplier, and that if we don't act, then we will leave Africa alone. And so I would now like to introduce to you, and I'm very pleased to introduce a very special invited speaker. It's Her Excellency Dr. Amani Abou-Zeid, the African Union Commissioner for Energy and Infrastructure, to speak. Please come to the podium. Let's do a fight, excuse.
Thank you, Excellency. Excellencies, distinguished participants, it's clearly a very good day, and for me to be here and happy to join this important meeting for physical in person for the first time in almost 2-3 years. So thank you, Mr. Birol, for allowing this opportunity. Fatih made it very difficult for me to make my intervention. I believe he's more African than I am. So he made the case for the continent. But let us just maybe reiterate some important facts, because as it was said by their excellencies earlier in this conversation, we do believe that addressing the energy issue in Africa is key to the global discussion on energy, and particularly the climate agenda. Important facts: 600 million Africans have no access to electricity. 900 million Africans do not have access to clean cooking, with hundreds of thousands dying from that every year. I'm saying again, hundreds of thousands dying prematurely every year just because of not having access to clean cooking. In addition, Africa is bearing the severe impacts of climate, though Africa is the least contributing to the climate crisis or the emissions. So there is, as a starter, we have a clear discrepancy, we have a clear unequal, unequitable situation happening in the world. And yes, Africa has tremendous opportunities and the resources when it comes to energy, whether it's natural gas or renewables and others. Now, the way the African Union is addressing the situation, again, we do believe we are mandated by our member states to expedite programs for access, universal access to reliable, affordable energy to all. And when I say affordable energy to all, I'm not talking about a bulb in a room. Our purpose is not to light up poverty. Our purpose is to alleviate and reduce poverty and allow for energy to be a catalyst for socio-economic development of the continent. Another element that was very clear and has always been clear in Africa, a lack of energy security either triggers conflicts in the continent or results in conflicts in the continent. So given it's really tragic that the world is going through what it's going through now, but it highlighted the centrality of the issue of energy to peace and security. This we knew also after the COVID, when we identified two main accelerators for recovery and resilience from COVID. One is energy access and digitalization. And guess what digitalization needs? Needs energy. So any way you look at it, from any perspective, it is central and should be expedited. The African Union is, as I said, we are mandated to expedite access to electricity and to energy for all, but also calls for dealing or addressing the climate issue with urgency. These are the exact words of our strategy. So our role is to combine, is to balance out these two imperatives. One, access to energy, and the second is the climate agenda. And I'm very happy to see and to say that all 55 African countries, without exception, have important renewable projects and programs. Let us remind ourselves that the two largest solar power plants are in Africa. One I helped construct, the one in Morocco, and the second is my own country. So it's also my personal pride in so many ways that in addition to the various hydro programs, the wind programs, the important program for geothermal energy that the African Union is leading in Eastern Africa and in island states, and so many other projects and programs. That said, the natural gas particularly is of prime importance, as I said, for clean cooking, for gas to power, as a base load for renewable energy. So this is not really the time when we rule out natural gas due to its important contribution to the very debate we are talking about, whether it's access or whether it is climate. Now, what are the hindrances to the many programs and projects that we are having? One of them is finance, and it's not just about finance, it's the very high cost of finance. Again, another irregularity, another inequity, a risk perception that is so unfair to Africa, and Africa has proved that it's probably the second safest place for investments, yet we're still suffering from very high premiums for capital and for risk. So we need to accelerate also de-risking mechanisms, and that should be an important priority in addressing in the COP27. Second, since I'm talking about finance, second is that what we notice in the all COPs, the focus would be on country-by-country approach. I believe we know that climate issues do not stop at anyone's borders, so they do not recognize borders. We need to act regionally and transcontinentally. So an important focus for finance should also go to regional and transcontinental approaches in addressing energy. We have devised a number, about 24 regional and transcontinental projects screened at various and different levels for the climate content, for their access content, and so on and so forth, for the continent, ready for finance. We also, so as to stop also anyone who is saying, you don't have bankable projects. No, they are. We have these 24 projects that we got approved late last year by our head states and governments, ready for finance to be presented in the COP. More importantly, in June 21, we launched the single African energy market. And that is a very ambitious program that we've launched last year, aiming to ensure that Africa benefits from all its energy resources to complement each other, to also build these regional transcontinental transmission, smart transmission or smart grids for transmission across Africa, so as for Africa to also to lift up Africa as a continent, not just as individual countries. We cannot do any of this alone. And let me, since we are here hosted by the IEA, to thank the IEA for fantastic collaboration over the years in building up a reliable, evidence-based energy database, but also various supports in different fora. And I want to also thank all our partners, countries and or organizations here present, and many of them are here present, for their contributions, their support, and the partnership with Africa in the various programs. Last but not least, Africa needs about $350 billion for its energy program going forward. This is a fantastic investment opportunity, and I do not know of any continent that can provide such an opportunity to anyone. So let us just flip the coin and look at what's happening in Africa as a fantastic opportunity waiting to happen, and it will only happen by joining forces, all of us together. And as I said, what is good for Africa is good for the world. And I thank you.
Thank you to the African Union Commissioner for these very inspiring words. In fact, let's get to work urgently and with ambition. I think that all of our speakers have truly set the stage for our panel discussion on perspectives from Africa and the industry. And so I'm extremely pleased to introduce our esteemed participants. For those of you that are here in person, could I please ask you to come to the stage as I call your name? We have Her Excellency Dr. Leila Benali, the Minister of Energy Transition and Sustainable Development, the Kingdom of Morocco. We have Her Excellency Dr. Nobuhle Nkabane, the Deputy Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy of South Africa. We have His Excellency Mr. Tarek El-Molla, the Minister of Petroleum, the Republic of Egypt, who will be joining us by video. His Excellency Mr. Oliver Menze Mukaleng, the Minister of Water Resources and Electricity of the Democratic Republic of Congo, who is also joining by video. Then we have Mr. Alexander Saverys, Chief Executive Officer of the company Maritime, Belge. And we have Mrs. Liliane Ndabaneze Chabuka, who is co-founder and CEO of Widenergy Africa, who is also joining by video. Greetings to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us today. And to make sure this is a more dynamic discussion, I will ask each of you a specific question to get our discussion started, but I will first join you on the floor. Thank you for joining us. Maybe it's my duty to say that you should keep to the time slot of 2 to 3 minutes, but please focus and take the time you need. And let me start with you, Dr. Benali. One thing that is now increasingly evident is that regional cooperation and integration is a key enabler of energy transitions, and Morocco now has serious ambitions to develop a green hydrogen industry that could have benefits in domestic as well as export markets. And what role do you see for enhanced regional cooperation to develop this sector, either as potential partners in supplying the necessary renewable electricity or as future customers?
Thank you very much. Well, first, I would like to thank the two co-chairs, Her Excellency Tinne Van der Straeten and Her Excellency Jennifer Granholm for, well, organizing this gathering and organizing, making sure that the voices, I think, of emerging countries, emerging markets, and African markets are being heard. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to first take us back to Glasgow, to where we were standing in Glasgow. And I think we all agree that it ended with, depending on who you talk to, the memorable agreement, regardless, right? And maybe more importantly, in light of the geopolitical dislocation that we are witnessing, that we have been witnessing in the last months, I think Glasgow ended with more solidarity with the countries most affected by climate change. So 6 years after Paris, we agreed that global greenhouse gas emissions must be reduced by 45% during this decade. 6 years after Paris, we agreed on the rules of implementation of updating every 5 years the nationally determined contributions. And Morocco has been quite progressive in its NDC. That's why I insist on that. And 6 years after Paris, we agreed to finally mobilize climate finance, whereby significantly increasing support to developing countries beyond the $100 billion per year that we have been discussing. So at COP26, Morocco has adhered to most of the declarations initiative, including the Powering Past Coal Alliance initiative. But I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's, for us, powering past coal cannot be done without access to sustainable gas and without access to further regional solidarity. And let me tell you why I'm raising this point. Because more interestingly, it was in Glasgow, early November, that Morocco, my country, managed to agree on just the reverse flow of a couple of pipelines. That solution that has been implemented in Eastern Europe a couple of years ago, we will be able to use the spare regasification capacity in some of our allies in Europe, in neighboring friendly countries. So I think in Glasgow, from our perspective, global energy and climate governance really dependent on those bilateral alliances and discussions and agreements with like-minded partners, public and private partners, by the way. So for Africa, I think an inclusive and just energy transition means increasing, of course, the share of green electricity in the mix, promote decentralized production and digitalization of energy services, improve household purchasing power, and we cannot do that, again, without a wider cooperation with like-minded allies. So I don't want to give you a lot of details on Morocco's achievements over the last decade or so. I just want to really focus on the future. And with our expertise, for example, in rural electrification, we've been working a lot under the radar, but working a lot in Africa, as you know. And through our Moroccan Agency for Sustainable Energy, Menze, within the framework of South-South cooperation, we have been engaged in, for example, the Coalition for Access to Energy that was launched jointly with Ethiopia, which was really focusing on access to energy, especially for African countries. And of course, the Desert to Power initiative that was mentioned by Secretary Granholm, which aims to provide electricity to actually more than 50 million people, hopefully more than 60 million people by 2030. And we are definitely part of it. So I think the role of regional solidarity and partnerships with like-minded public and private players definitely has its role, because we cannot just leapfrog. We really have to walk together in this energy transition. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your remarks. and you have mentioned several times the climate agenda and also COP26, and I would use this bridge to come to Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy of South Africa, Dr. Nobuhle Nkabane. You showed a great leadership at COP26 with the declaration statement from South Africa also about phasing out coal. But at the same time, you are installing at impressive pace new solar and wind capacities in your country. So my question would be, where is your country today with its transition plans?
No, thank you so much, Program Director of the session, and greetings to the participants in this plenary. One, I think we need to start by indicating that as South Africa, we're committed to the Paris Agreement as well as a COP26 commitment. And we're moving towards ensuring that we then generate clean energy in our country. To attest that, as I'm seated here today, the President has established what we call as Presidential Climate Commission, which is responsible to ensure that all the policy interventions and initiatives that we come up with as the country respond to the issues of climate change. Recently, we then developed what we call as hydrogen value final report, as well as the roadmap to ensure that we become green as the country. And most of our, as you know, that we then generate our energy from coal. Most of our plants are then coming towards their lifespan around 2040 and 2050. Then it then gives us an opportunity as the country then to repurpose that infrastructure and ensure that we move towards renewables. And when you look at our country in terms of its geological and geographical location, we are well positioned to then become a key role player in issues of just transition as well as renewable energy. So we are working very hard to ensure that we meet our targets, and together with our integrated resource plan that states that we wanted to scale down from 75% of coal generation to 60% by 2030. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. It was what you are doing on coal is a real example to all of us around the world. I would like to pass on the floor to our colleague from Egypt, Minister of Petroleum, Tarek El-Molla. He is with us on video. And I would like to take a focus on investment with him. Also, the African Union Commissioner has talked about finance and about investments, and we have seen that Egypt was able to attract a lot of investments. And as was pointed out already, the energy transition investments are crucial for that, to make the energy transition to make it a success. So I wanted to ask for you, what can we learn from your country? How did you do that? And how will you approach this subject as president of COP27?
Thank you. Thank you, Dear Excellency. I just wanted to start by greeting everybody, and I have to start by His Excellency Dr. Fatih Birol, the Executive Director of the IEA, as well as Your Excellency Jennifer Granholm, the IEA Ministerial Chair and Secretary of Energy of the United States of America, as well as your good self, Your Excellency Tinne Van der Straeten, IEA Ministerial Vice Chair and Minister of Energy for Belgium, as well as my dear colleague, Her Excellency Dr. Amani Abou-Zeid, Commissioner of Energy and Infrastructure for African Union, as well as all my dear colleagues on the panel. Well, I have a good day to all of you and good afternoon. I would like really to extend my really heartfelt thank you for having me in this ministerial event panel, as well as to take part of this vital session. So I'm sorry, I was very keen to attend in person, but regretfully, I was not able to make it. So thank you again for being able to accommodate my participation in this virtual setting. So Excellencies, and ladies and gentlemen, today's gathering comes at a critical time, not only for the industry, for the energy industry, but also for the whole world. Global energy markets have been put to the test during the past few years, moving from one extreme to another, with pandemic causing an oversupply of oil to potential shortages today. This has further emphasized the importance of managing the energy transition, security. Coming to the main theme of today's session, the African continent is blessed with a wealth of natural resources in addition to significant renewable energy potential. Despite this, the continent is lagging behind in economic development and welfare, and over 600 million citizens suffer from energy poverty. Moreover, the continent is still heavily dependent on biomass as a primary source of energy, which results in premature fatalities and deforestation. In the same context, the role of oil and gas remains critical for Africa to eliminate its energy poverty, especially since renewable energy alone would not be sufficient to meet the continent's rising energy demand. Fossil fuels also represent a main source of revenue for several African countries. Access to finance, technologies to make energy resources cleaner, with special emphasis on gas and renewable energy, in addition to capacity building, remain key challenges facing African countries to fulfill their development aspirations and support in transition to low carbon energy sources. In this respect, Egypt is leading the efforts towards the development of an African energy transition and climate initiative to be launched during COP27, hosted by Egypt. This initiative is being developed in collaboration with the African Union and the African energy ministers. It considers the African continent at its core and aims to achieve a balanced and just energy transition that does not cause serious harm to our planet, while recognizing the continent's differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities. The idea of this initiative was raised and received very positively last month during the Egypt Petroleum Show, where His Excellency President Sisi reiterated the need to achieve balanced outcomes from COP27 that consider the African continent's special circumstances and capabilities. It is worth mentioning that Egypt aspires for COP27 to be an implementation COP and will endeavor to promote international climate action to reach the Paris Agreement goals. So, Excellencies and distinguished guests, I strongly urge Your Excellencies to make use of the fruitful relations between the IEA and the African Union Commission to develop tailored solutions, roadmaps, and mobilize the appropriate technologies and finance to support balanced energy transitions in Africa. I look forward to continue working closely with all of African countries and stakeholders to develop the African Initiative for climate change and energy transition, and for ultimately reaching successful outcomes for COP27. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency Tarek Molla, and the room is applauding you. And we are looking forward. We are looking forward for your presidency of COP27. and we see each other in Egypt then by the end of the year. I would like to pass on the floor to His Excellency Oliver Menze Mukaleng. He is a Minister of Water Resources and Electricity in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Mr. Mukaleng, you're also the outgoing president of the African Union. And so I would like to ask you, what do you view as the key takeaways from COP26 for African countries? And also your continent facing severe impacts of the COVID crisis, how energy can be considered as an entry point when recovering better. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the question. I would like to greet everybody and thank all the organizers for this session. I'm pleased to take part, even though I'm taking part at a distance. I just want to mention, as outgoing President of African Union, we look at obviously the question on a global point of view. What we can remember from COP26 is that this transition, this energy transition, is a global issue. So we need to find solution as a unit. It's not just a solution that has to be brought by European countries or developed countries. It's a global solution. So Africa holds part of the solution, and the rest of the world holds the other part of the solution. One part that Africa has is the potential, the potential, the energetic potential of Africa. Especially here in DRC, we have our hydropower potential, which is almost equal to 100,000 megawatts. Sorry, and that is a huge potential that can resolve solution not only for DRC, but also for other African countries, neighboring countries in the region. So we need to look at solutions that is going to bring interconnections between neighboring countries, and we need to have solutions that are going to bring electricity to our rural populations as well. So when you look at it, it's a great business opportunity, in the sense that there is a potential, but we have to understand as well that most of the African population, in this case, is really poor. So they cannot afford electricity, especially because there is a very high cost. It was said earlier, there is a very high cost in providing electricity to our population. We have to look at the size of our countries. We have to look at the size of our continent. So the main thing that I'm going to take away from COP26 is that we need to act together. And Africa needs to have access to financing, to technologies from other developed countries. It needs to come in all sorts of form. It needs to be investment. We are open now with private partnership in most of African countries. But we also need to have access to the credit carbons, to fundings, all sorts of fundings that can help us to quickly cover the gap between what we have now, which is very low access to electricity, and what we aim to make sure that our populations do not have that heavy impact on our forests, on our on our environment in general. So funding would be one. So we need to make sure that African countries get access to various forms of funding to be able to catch up and to catch up quickly. So that's the first part. But obviously we have the technology that we need to learn from various other countries. We have different environments, and we have not done enough studies to see what type of technology can work in Africa. So we need to work together and exchange knowledge about this so that we can quickly catch up on this gap that is alarming. Thank you.
Thank you. Also for your comment on funding, as we are talking also about COP26 and upcoming 27, it's my personal and strong belief that we didn't deliver enough for international financing during all the COPs that we've had, and so maybe I hope COP27 will make a difference here. I would now like to introduce a fellow citizen of my country, Alexander Saverys is Chief Executive Officer of the company Maritime Belge. Maybe, Alexander, I would like to ask you, how does it feel to be on an all-feminine podium? No, it's a joke.
Well, it feels great.
Okay.
I thought you were going to ask me how does it feel to sit in an all-minister podium.
Oh, no.
Because
leadership comes with women.
I feel very honored as the only non-minister or non-commissioner in this panel.
Yes.
To be able to address a few words.
Yes, but we specifically invited you for because you are not a minister, but because what you are doing with your company already today in Africa, you are so active in developing clean energy projects in Africa, and I would like to ask you, what are the biggest opportunities? We talk a lot of opportunities here, but maybe you should, as we are ministers, also address the obstacles where we can help you.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I'm the CEO of a shipping company, and in shipping we burn every year 300 million tons of diesel. And of the 12 billion tons of cargo we move worldwide as a shipping industry, about half of it is oil, coal and gas. So we have two issues. We need to decarbonize our operations, our engines, how we go from A to B. And we of course need to find new cargoes for our vessels in the next decades. So on our path and our thinking on how we can decarbonize not only our industry but also our company, we decided to move towards hydrogen and green ammonia. So hydrogen for smaller applications, smaller vessels, trucks, heavy mining equipment, and green ammonia. As you probably know, large industrial applications cannot shift to batteries easily. And we know there's still a lot of progress to be made, but if I would need to carry my ship from Brazil to China with batteries, I would need 5 battery ships behind my ship. So that doesn't really work. And then of course the question is, where do we find the hydrogen? And where do we find the green ammonia? And one of the key elements we've been looking at is obviously where can we produce renewable energy at the cheapest cost. And I think it's been said already today, Africa has a tremendous potential on hydro, on solar and on wind. But on top of that, where can we connect the ships that are moving goods from A to B with the source of the energy? And again, Africa is a fantastic location. I think you alluded to it. The geography of Africa, whether it's the south, the east, the west, or the north, it's at the center of world trade. And on top of that, economic growth is, in the next decades, going to come from Africa, because as we know, population growth is also going to be centered there. So then we started looking at a location where we could indeed produce this hydrogen and ammonia, and I think there's many countries here that can offer fantastic locations. The location we have chosen is Namibia to start with, which is not far from your country, obviously, which sits on a good location. And you asked me, what are the obstacles? Well, let me first say, as being a member of a shipping industry, I'm not going to ask for any money from governments. So I'm not going to tell you that you should fund our operation or give me subsidies. Our biggest obstacle is getting permits, is getting a regulatory framework. And I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm sure there's many other entrepreneurs in this audience. what we need is basically certainty of doing business. And if we know that there's a framework within which we can act, we will then act. And we will act purely and simply because our customers demand it. And if there's a customer demand, we will have to create the product. If governments can assist us with a good framework, then I'm sure we can do fantastic things. And so as a conclusion, I don't see many obstacles. I see more opportunities than obstacles. But if we need help, we are never going to ask money from the African governments. We're just going to ask to be able to interact with them in order to develop the right frameworks to develop the business. Thank you.
Thank you. Always look for this. Always look for the solution. Huh? That's what binds us here together. And regulatory framework. It's also we can address from the European perspective. Looking at Kadri Simson, who will talk to us later today in a few minutes, with regards, for example, to hydrogen and also to maritime transport. And I would now like to pass on to the floor to another woman, Mrs. Liliane Chabuka. She's co-founder and CEO of Widenergy Africa, and I want to introduce you with a question about access to electricity. A lot has already been said about energy poverty, also in Africa. Important issue in Africa. How can we make access to electricity possible and affordable, and how can we scale this up, what you are doing in Zambia? How can this be scalable across the region?
Thank you very much. I am honored to be here. I greet everyone, those who are joining on video and those who are in the audience. It's definitely an honor for me to share the podium with the amazing people. So, first of all, Widenergy is a local company operating in Zambia in Southern Africa, where 70% of the population has no access to electricity. And it is possible now that we talk about renewable energy, because this becomes now the solution to the problem that we are facing, especially for a country like Zambia that has a very low density. And that makes practically a huge cost to the government to include rural electrification. It is possible, as Widenergy, what we are doing that has already been mentioned is have access to the rural area to give them solar home system that give them the power, the energy, as you said, and access to electricity. Most of our customers are actually having access to renewable energy for the first time once they are onboarded. The things we take for granted in a day-to-day where people can click on a clip of a hand, call Siri to put on the lights, our customers actually think about the fact that they're switching on their lights. And it's that switch that really helps the kids to study for longer hours. It's that switch that helps the mother to prepare dinner faster for the family. It's basically that switch that they appreciate because it changes their lives. We've talked about the numbers. We've talked about how it needs to be changed. We need to talk about the numbers. In our mission, we empower women because we want to make them basically the center of the clean energy, to be able to be the advocates and the ambassadors of clean and renewable energy. And we've seen it work in our area. And we hope that we are able, as you mentioned, to have this process scalable. It's affordable because we give the products on loan that they pay slowly. It is affordable as well because it's on a loan. It is affordable because we try to leverage on already existing technology, like making payment on mobile money, so we do not have to have huge investment that will cost us. We try to have it affordable because we also hire local and use local labor. I would love to actually mention that our company is a women initiative for delivering energy. We empower women. We have 50% of our field office food soldiers in the field, and we also have 60% of female in our company. The scalability, which here would be the main issue if as opposed to the previous speaker, I will ask for help for the government. I'll ask for help in terms of finance. I'll ask for help in terms of access to affordable loans for local companies. It is a challenge in terms of scalability, but we've seen the model work in East Africa. It's now big. It has had a huge impact, and it's now being experienced in the Southern Africa. Also, more support will be needed from the local government. Better partnership with the companies that we work with, better funding opportunities, especially to the small local companies that are working in this area. We always have to face huge competition from huge companies that are funded by huge international organizations. Today, I definitely believe, as you earlier mentioned, that if we need to fight climate change, it has to be the work for everybody. And I applaud for the initiatives, and thank you very much.
Thank you for what you are doing. And for me, you and the previous speaker, Alexander Saverys, you perfectly complement each other. So the needs are different for everyone, and we can act on both sides. I would now like to open the floor for comments and questions, and I would ask you to limit this to 1-2 minutes, because we are already closing almost the session. And I would like to first call on the EU Commissioner, Kadri Simson. She's responsible for energy. She's our energy commissioner. Europe has been a leader in supporting the IEA's work in Africa. And could you please come to the microphone just there and give some of your insights on that topic? She will be followed, I was asked to say it, she will be followed by Japanese State Minister Odawara.
Thank you, Tinne, and thank you for hosting this excellent panel. It was only last month when in Brussels we hosted African and EU leaders, and they agreed on new priorities for sustainable growth in the African continent. And from our side, we also announced the Global Gateway EU-African investment package of 150 billion euros. And the African EU Green Energy Initiative that focuses on energy efficiency and renewable energy. And since then, we all know lots has happened. Putin's war on Ukraine has made it absolutely clear that we need to reshape the European landscape, and we have to get rid of our very dangerous dependency on Russian fossil fuels. And with the launch of REPowerEU, we put forward the plan how we will do that. And of course, it means that we have to diversify our supply routes. Egypt, Algeria, and Nigeria are today a very reliable oil suppliers for EU, and we want to increase these trade flows. But this doesn't change our commitment to the Green Deal or the conviction that green transition will be at the heart of the EU and our cooperation agenda with Africa. And we all know that last decade saw significant increase and incredible development of competitiveness of solar and wind technologies, and of course dramatic drop of prices also in Africa. Just last month I had a chance to visit in Senegal the solar power plant that produces electricity with such a low price as 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So more renewables across the continent will lead to greater industrial opportunities, and these will lead to more jobs. And for us, using the green hydrogen as a basis, Africa is perfectly placed to enter the growing market for production of green fertilizers and green steel, for example. So I invite all of us here in the hall to support Africa, to grasp this new opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Kadri, for these insightful comments. And also, Kadri, it's maybe a touchy thing to mention, but I would also like to thank you to give this subliminal message about solidarity with Ukraine. And I will now call on State Minister Odawara of Japan, another country that enabled the IEA to increase its focus on Africa, and he will be followed by Mr. Suman Sinha, CEO of Renew Power. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you for letting me take part in this meeting. And thank you, Dr. Birol and Excellencies, participants, and Excellencies and participants through video. It's a beautiful day in Paris, clear and crisp, but with many people still lacking access to modern energy in Africa, promoting a clean energy transition is essential for economic growth and improving people's access to energy. However, since last year, the surging energy markets has been further destabilized by Russia's invasion to Ukraine, significantly impacting people's access to energy in Africa. Leaving the current situation unaddressed is simply unacceptable, thus requiring more substantial efforts by international community. In particular, I believe it's of utmost importance that energy-related investments in Africa be continued. To promote the energy transition as quickly as possible under such unstable circumstances as the corona crisis and situation in Ukraine, I believe that an approach that combines all energy sources and technologies that considers the energy situation in each country and region is realistic option to be taken. Based on this understanding, Japan provided approximately 5 million euros last year to support capacity building such as policy development support and human resources development to enable the energy transition in African countries economically damaged by corona crisis. We will continue working with the IEA Secretariat and local government to promote this initiative effectively. Lastly, Japan will be hosting TICAD 8 this year and will be continue to work on energy issues and economic growth in Africa while listening closely to their needs. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, State Minister Odawara. And I'll give the floor to Mr. Sinha of Renew Power. He will be followed by Mr. Claudio Fachin, CEO of Hitachi Energy.
Hi, good afternoon, Excellencies. It is a pleasure to listen to you and to learn more about the situation in Africa from an energy transition standpoint. A quick word about our company. We are India's largest renewable energy company. We have about 10 gigawatts of wind and solar capacity currently in operation in the country. As I was sitting and listening, I was struck by the similarities between the two continents, as it were, between India and Africa. We have a roughly similar size population of about 1.2, 1.3 billion. The per capita income levels are also very similar. But India has the advantage that we are a single country. And therefore, there are many things that we are able to do within our country that perhaps is less easy in Africa. And a couple of those things which I'll just talk about, which could be very important in actually furthering the energy transition really faster, is, for example, India has a single transmission network. And that makes the whole country a single market. Now, if Africa could become a single market, you could actually produce in one part of Africa and ship it to a totally different part and thereby really take advantage of costs of generation. So I think that is something that is very important. And if all the countries could get together and focus on that, that I think will be a very significant step forward. The second thing is that of sovereign risk. The fact is that Africa has 55 countries. And therefore, each market by itself is small and different, because we all know that all the countries in Africa are very different from each other. If there can be some degree of sovereign risk protection, then a lot of companies would be quite eager to get in much bigger size and scale into the continent. So I think that is the second thing to look at. The third really is how can we construct products that are grid friendly? How can we replicate quasi baseload power, which you get from coal, through renewable energy by combining wind and solar and storage together to actually provide products that are really matching the demand generation, the demand side. So I think that kind of innovation which we've done in India is something that we can very easily also share with our African colleagues. India also has the International Solar Alliance, which is now moving forward quite rapidly, and there are many Indian companies that are operating in Africa, setting up projects in the country. But I think the key question is how do we do it at real scale, because we all know the urgency of climate change is really terrific and very, very significant. And so really we have to do really, really large-sized gigawatt-scale projects in the country, in Africa, for which we really need a very different way of thinking about it. And so while energy access is of course important, and cooking stoves and access to power is very critical for the population, we really need to be able to find solutions that are in the gigawatts level rather than at a micro level. And for that, really, I think it is imperative for all the countries to get together in the continent so that we can find those kinds of solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to call on Mr. Claudio Facin from Hitachi Energy.
Thank you, everyone. And I just can echo all the messages. Three points from a technology provider. If you look at the continent, Africa, all the key technologies that we have been deploying in the last decades globally and in developed markets, we have also been able to deploy those same technologies with the same advancement and innovation in the continent. Whether it's bulk renewable integration or interconnections with high voltage DC technology, for instance, we have operationally systems working in Africa. At the same time, at the edge of the grid, so the microgrid, with storage, integrating renewables rather than burning diesel, a lot of that technology is being deployed as we speak in the continent. The key point, I think, is what was just mentioned. We have to jointly look at this, avoid that we look at this in silos, but look at this as a market system. You mentioned also Europe as a good example of looking at that single energy market system. There is an opportunity to push that forward. And particularly, keeping in mind, we heard about the challenge of high cost of capital in this part of the world. At the same time, if we have policies that, for instance, look at what is the best way to accelerate decarbonization, what is the cheapest way, the more affordable way to take out tons of CO2 from the system. Of course, in developed markets, in developed economies like Africa, there is an opportunity to leverage that because deploying some of those technologies might be faster and cheaper in those parts of the world. So once again, collaboration across and looking at the system, looking at leveraging all the technologies at the edge, but also interconnecting and making the energy market one unique that potentially could also then connect to Europe and help everyone decarbonizing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm afraid that we are already 7 minutes behind schedule, which does not surprise me. I said this before, that we should not end this, that we could not end this at the expected time. When I speak for myself, but I think I speak for all of you, that this is a very energizing session because we really managed to talk more about opportunities than about difficulties. And it's my firm belief that we need this ambitious and positive approach because otherwise we are not going to make it. I would like to conclude with an invitation to the IEA to step up its work on 4 points. And although they are not in order of importance, the first one is the most important one. And that is to heighten further its engagement with Africa, mainstreaming the continent across all work streams. And this, for me, is the most important conclusion, because we cannot look at it in silos, as was mentioned, and we need to become one and see this from a global perspective. And that means also within IEA, the African continent needs to be mainstreamed. And the second point is to continue its regional work on clean energy transitions with an emphasis on best practices, focusing on promising technologies, for example, the potential of hydrogen in Africa. And the third one is to identify practical actions that industry, government, and international multilateral mechanisms such as the Clean Energy Ministerial, but also Mission Innovation and the G20 can take to drive down the cost and accelerate energy investment on the continent. And the fourth point, also together with the first point, the second most important one, and it's combining what Alexander and what Liliane said. It's to further strengthen international action to address existing barriers to investment. It can be regulatory framework and permits, and to promote capital deployment to clean energy across the continent. What Liliane said, and I do believe that these are two complementary challenges that we need to overcome, and I also do believe that there is a very important role for COP27 to deliver on this subject. And the Chair's statement following by this meeting will echoing these 4 points. So I would like to thank all of you. I know that we could take maybe 10 more minutes, but I would give all of you the chance to speak to each other here in the room as we are meeting in person and physically, that we can have some follow-up between us. So thank you very much. I'm very happy we did this, and I hope to see you all very soon.